stories. And so I think even we are here to listen to your stories itself.
Okay. Okay.
So thank you so much, sir. And
Yeah.
so I think then without any further delays, we'll
Sure.
just get on to the questions.
Sure.
First, we'll take some questions around organization building and culture building. The audience that's here today on this call, they've already pulled in these questions. So we'll try to take them one by one.
Okay.
The first question is, how do we sustain the culture of any organization, especially when it grows so fast and has wide operations?
Okay. Answer is very simple. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Nothing more than that. And when you're talking about scaling, again, let me give you an example. Um, at HDFC, we prided ourselves that in 25 years, we had grown from one employee to 1,500 employees. And I think even today, HDFC doesn't have that many. And then in 2000, I moved to set up the life insurance company. And there, in 3 years, from one employee, we had reached 18,000. Okay? So one lesson there is what worked very well and what we took great pride in at HDFC was not something which could be replicated in the life insurance business. So the business is very different. Okay? It's a question of reach. And at HDFC, we sat in our office at that time and people came to us. In life insurance, you had to go out. So you needed to create an organization. Now, when you start an organization, you've got 10, 12 people around you and you're interacting with them every day. You know them, you know what their positives, negatives, support requirement, whatever, you know it. But then when you get to 600 branches across the country, it's not easy. And I also figured out that it was not easy for me to travel. And so even though I traveled about 20 days a month, there's no way I could have covered all 600 branches on a regular basis. So what you need to do is create a cadre of people who, in a way, will become clones of what you represent. You do that also by recruiting people of similar value systems and value sets. So when you bring them on board, you only bring on those people who will imbibe the same values or who already have the same values as what you have. It's not a question of teaching them, because by the time you recruit them, they're in their 20s and 30s. Making changes in their mindsets is not easy. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. So you need to get people on board. And my belief always has been that I don't want the most brilliant guy. Okay? I never looked at, I didn't recruit a single person from the IIMs. I wouldn't go there. I just want a person who's got the hunger. I want a person who's got the values. I got the person who has a desire to do something. He will wish to create something, and he knows by hard work he can do it. And I think that is important. So I think when I say communication, it's basically that you just need to go out and not talk. Because nobody listens to you. Nobody listens to a leader. Okay? You can go and give all the lectures on values and ethics and everything. Nobody. It's like water on a duck's back. They're only looking at you and observing how you behave, how you deal with people, how you deal with customers, how you deal with clients, how you deal with staff. So, like I've said, a leader is on stage 7/24. He's under observation all the time. He's like an insect under a microscope. Okay? No, he doesn't know it, but I think everybody is evaluating what he's doing. He's saying this thing, he's doing this. Is there a mismatch? And I think that's the only way. You can't fast forward the culture building in any organization. So, yes, you've grown, but I think when you grow, at least when the people who go out there must have the same thing. And also, you people cannot pass on the message of values and culture. Not the people who are sitting in this call today. It's all the guys down the line. And just last week, I was on a board call where the chairman happily announced that we have now appointed a very senior person as our chief culture officer. Okay. And I said, this is my view, is doomed to fail. Okay. But you can't have someone sitting at the corporate office and talking about culture. I think the frontline manager is the one who's responsible for building the culture and the values of an organization, not the guy sitting in the head office. The staff and the workers are going to be looking at him, observing him, and they will do what he does. That's what a leader is about. Okay, so it's examples, nothing else, nothing else. It sounds a very simple answer, but actually it is very simple. I mean, we didn't even know when we started HDFC in 77, 78. We didn't know the word culture. It's just how you behave which sets the culture and how you behave at the top. I mean, the one thing I'll never forget is Deepak Parekh, and all of you have heard of him, know of him. It's a doyen in the financial sector. He was at the top of the organization. We were very, very few people. So when he went off to meet senior, whether it was bureaucrats or whether he went to meet senior people in the banks or wherever, and he took me along. And he would always introduce me as my colleague. I was way down the line for him. I wasn't a colleague, I was one of his juniors. But he always said, this is my colleague. And I think once you say that, you buy that person's loyalty. Then you don't want to let him down. Then you start doing things which are not even expected of you. And I think that's what the whole thing about the leadership journey is, and what building a culture and a value is. Don't have that as an objective. Don't say my item number one, I have to build a culture. It doesn't happen. Okay? It is something which will happen as you live your life in the organization. So please don't set targets of by 31st of December, we will have this culture across. We will run these courses, we will run these programs, we will have the... No. You just live your life in the manner you want others to live. That's all. Long answer to a very short question.
Thank you so much for that long answer, sir, because I think we're all right now working very hard towards building that culture. And I think this insight is very helpful to us as well, because it's something that's happening right now in our organizations, and we're trying to work towards it. So this is something that will definitely keep us going in that effort. And we could come down to the next question, which is a little related to this itself, that how do we promote a learning culture in civil society organizations when it has a lot of focus on operations and targets to achieve? So how do we factor in this learnability aspect as well and endorse it?
I guess it's also going back to the same thing. People that you recruit. I mean, do they have a thirst for learning? Do they have an appetite for learning? And that's one of the reasons why I don't recruit. I mean, I know a lot of my colleagues have told me also that when they go, they don't go to IIMs, and I'm not picking on these, okay? I'm just giving it as an example, because the top three management schools in the country are IIM, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta. Okay, everybody knows that. And so this guy said, I never go to them. I will go to institutions much below them. It's not that they're less bright, okay? They're less academically bright, maybe. Okay, maybe they had less opportunities to be not get coached and everything to get into these. But he said the problem is when I go to the top ranking institutions, on day one, those graduates want to come and tell me how to run my organization. They have no desire to learn because they believe they know it all. Whereas if I go to the next level, there is a hunger to learn. And I think what you need to do is create a hunger to learn. Again, I mean, I'll give again all of it will be related to my experience and my examples. Okay. It's at HDFC, people and my children especially, they used to earlier say, I mean, 30 years in one company, one group, okay, out of which 20 at HDFC. He said, how can, I mean, did you get bored? And I said, unfortunately, I didn't have the time to get bored because no 2 days were the same. in the beginning, it's like you guys are right now, because I didn't like, I mean, one of the things is I spent 6 weeks in Citibank, okay? And then I quit and joined HDFC. Because in Citibank, I would have spent my life following the rules that somebody else had written. Whereas at HDFC, I had the opportunity to write the rules that we would follow. And I think to me, that was important. That I'm not just a cog in a wheel, that I will be. And I mean, it goes all the way back. I mean, at IIT, I got an opportunity, two offers. One was from Larsen and Toubro at 750 rupees a month, and the other one was from a company called Centron. No one's heard of it, at 600 rupees a month. And that's the offer that I took. Because I said at L&T, I will not get a chance to learn, because I had heard that in the first 3 years, they don't want management trainees and graduate trainees to talk to anyone. Don't disturb the workers, don't disturb. You just observe. Whereas in this small company, they could not afford me as an overhead hanging around. On day one, they shoved me in and start working. And we did so many different things. So I think learnability is not a taught attribute. It's an attribute that you have. I mean, do I wish to learn? I mean, the things we did at HDFC, over the period, we helped create the National Housing Bank. We created an infrastructure finance company. We created a bank. We created an asset management company. We created a life insurance company. We created a general insurance company. We did consultancy in 18 countries in the world. In 1979, January, when I joined, I didn't think we'd do any of this. And nobody told us that after this you do this and after that you do that. No, you just scan and see what else is possible. The only difference is that we did this over a period of time. You guys are trying to do everything overnight. Okay, and that's the other caution, but I'll come back to that later. So learning is something which you got to have as an intrinsic trait. It's not something which I can tell you that you must do this thing, and lecturing people about learning doesn't work. They will also see what the leader does. Is he learning anything? Is he learning different things? Is he doing things differently? Or is he doing the same things? So you can talk as much as you want, but if you don't will actually implement that in your life and practice, nobody follows. So that's learning. The other thing, whenever I've interviewed people, I've never asked them about their skills or their degrees or anything. To me, that is irrelevant. Okay? That was something which he had to fill out the form, so he had to get a degree. I just want to know about him. What excites him and what doesn't excite him. What does he read? For me, reading is a passion. As you can see behind me, I've got millions of books. Reading is important. And I tell all my guys, they've got bored of my telling them. I said, please read. And I really don't care what you read. You can pick up a James Hadley Chase, which I think maybe not be an author you guys are familiar with, but he was a mystery writer and a whodunit type of writer in our times. Okay, I said, read that, because in that book, you will, for every issue, you will find 2 points of view. One is of the guy who committed the murder, and two is of the detective who is after him. So same event, but they're two alternate views. It just increases your learning. You don't need to live everything in life. You can observe, you can hear, and learn from it. So learning, if you believe that you descended from heaven and you are the last word in knowledge, you will not learn. But if you believe that you're like a sponge, the other thing I've told Santosh often is I've found that I learn best by asking questions. I ask questions. If I don't understand something, you talked about CSO, and I wrote to Santosh, I said, Santosh, please tell me, what is a CSO? Okay, you're asking me to talk to, he said, sir, that's civil society organization. I said, oh, okay, and I'm supposed to talk to them about how they should behave, how they should run it, when I don't even know what these terms are. But if you don't know, you ask. That's the other lesson I learned. When I was in school, I would hesitate to ask a question, thinking that the teacher will say, "You stupid fellow, you don't know even that." So I wouldn't ask. And then the neighboring kid would ask the same question. And the teacher would say, "Great question." And I would say, "God, why didn't I ask that question?" Okay. So it's ask. If you don't know, ask. At best, what can they do? They can laugh at you. But after they laugh at you, if you look at yourself, there is no hurt that you have. They get hurt by laughing at you. You don't get hurt. Okay. Unless you choose to get hurt. So, so I think, I mean, it's again, very, very long answer. You cannot train people to learn. They need to be observant. And the fields in which you are working and where all you're working, I mean, I think there would be 1,000 learning opportunities every day. I mean, how things get done when there is no marker along the way. Okay? There are no guideposts, there are no directions. You're going and charting new paths. So what you learn in one place, you implement somewhere else. But it can't be exactly the same because what worked in Jharkhand may not work in Tamil Nadu. The people are different. So I think it's important that you need to learn the context in which what works. And that's why, I mean, one of the things I love to say is you should not be adopting anything. You should be adapting it. So you hear of a concept, if you like the concept, see how it will work. So, I mean, if you look at Teach for America and Teach for India, they're very different. And our Teach for India is what is being tried to transfer to many other developing countries. Because a developed country and a developing country, problems are very different. But a developing country to a developing country, it's easier. And that's the reason why I think you need to recruit people who are willing to learn and say, "I don't know." There's nothing wrong with saying, "I don't know." I mean, even today at this age, there are lots of things I don't know. My technology expert is my grandson. So, yeah. Okay. I think maybe I'm taking too long for my answers. Huh?
No worries at all, sir. We're really
Huh?
enjoying listening.
Sir, we have time after 11 o'clock also. You have to check your
We
calendar.
can sit and listen to you all day, sir. No
No,
worries
no,
at
no.
all.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll definitely move on to the next segment, and in terms of culture and organization building, if anyone has any questions when we come to the part where you can ask your questions directly to Deepak, sir,
Yeah.
you can just unmute yourself and ask the questions. So I'll quickly move on to the next part, which is where both of the organizations that have joined us today are running state level interventions towards education and education leadership transformation. And while they are doing exemplary work, we're also learning the ropes of running these state level transformation programs, and engaging with different state governments as well. So the next few questions that we have are around this aspect. One of it is that in our state programs, we focus a lot on forming collectives of organizations, different organizations coming together towards one intervention. And given that all of the organizations have their own way of working and thinking, what are some structures and processes that we could establish, and what strategies could we keep in mind to take this forward in a smooth manner to avoid miscoordination between organizations?
Okay. What you're basically talking about when you say collective, these are partnerships. What
Yes.
I've understood from Santosh is that you come in with the overarching concept or the idea coming in from or approval from the state government, and then you work with local level NGOs to implement it. Okay. So in a partnership, I think, like in any partnership, I think it's most important that you're compatible. First things first. Forget about everything else. So then saying that what do we need to do in terms of structures and processes so that we don't have any mismatches. That should have been taken care of at the beginning. They may come up again later, but you need to spend a lot more time in figuring out who you are going to partner with and are they the right institution to go with. It may be expedient to go with them because they are available there and it makes my life easier because I can implement it faster and the state government will be happy. And yeah, but choosing a wrong partner, after that, you'll be spending half your year in trying to fix that relationship and trying to get it back onto track. So please, please, please spend all your time and energy up front, invest it up front in finding the right partners because they must share your values and your ethos. There's no other way. After that, I think what is important is, I mean, 'cause by working with collectives, I don't know whether you people have realized what you've taken on. Because I've seen a lot of CEOs when they retire and then they go and become non-executive or independent directors on the board. They've not realized even then that they don't have power anymore, that they can't do things. They have to now get it done. And therefore, whenever you're promoting people also, what do? He's excellent at his work. He does it great. So you move him up to the next level. This is what corporate India does, or the corporates do. Without realizing that he's a great worker, but he's not a great leader. Because he does not believe that anyone can do any job half as good as he can do. So he ends up doing his old job plus the new job. And you can't keep on doing this thing forever. So I think you need to find people who are able to delegate and get it done. Doing a thing and getting it done are two different things. And you need to be able to do that. The last point I want to say is I think end of the day, the organization that you choose to partner with, you need to, both of you need to be very clear what your end objective is. The end objective is the education of that child. Now, whether it happens because I told you to do something or you told me to do something, does it really matter? It doesn't. Whatever works for the child is important. And I think therefore there has to be a certain amount of shrinking of the ego, the I. So you need to find people. So it's the whole thing is about people. Unfortunately, nothing of this is taught in the management schools or anywhere. Okay, they will have a theory course, but you learn everything on the field, and that's where the learning and the learnability all comes in from. You're learning on the field all the time. How do you build an organization with a structure? Structures don't make cultures. Structures don't make organizations. You will have a structure which can work today, cannot work tomorrow. Okay, there are structures which have been tried. Every 15 years they do it. A matrix organization, a vertical organization, a horizontal organization. Those are great things for a consultant to come in and do. So he'll say, whatever you've done the last 10 years is wrong. You got to do this. 10 years later, he'll come back and tell you that whatever you've been doing is wrong, do this. I don't think a structure is important. I think the people are important. So you need to invest time because what you are doing with working with collectives is you have no authority. Okay? But you're trying to influence them. Influencing without authority is one of the toughest things to do. And that can happen only if that person accepts you as a leader, as a person who is of a higher knowledge level. If he accepts you for that, then life is easy. But if he thinks you're inferior, then trying to tell him to do and accept it, you got problems. So, dictating, no. See, the other thing which I've learned, which I've shared this thing with, to me, it doesn't matter. Be educating a child is what matters to me today. In other times also, it didn't matter whether anyone said, wow, this was a great idea from Deepak. I don't care who the idea was from. So if there is an idea of doing a thing differently, I will socialize it. I will talk to 5 people, 10 people about it. And I know sometime a little later, somebody will come back and say that he's got a brilliant idea. And he will tell me what that idea is. And for me, I'm saying that was fantastic. We should accept that idea and let's implement it. How does it make a difference? Who gets the credit for it? The job got done. I think that's what matters. The fact that all of you are in this sector have shown that egos are not as high. But having said that, let me also caution you. I've seen higher egos in the not-for-profit sector than in the corporate world. I have seen it. It's my way. That doesn't work. If you really want eventual success, it can't work. So please, working with people is what is important. And investing your time up front. If it takes a little longer in finding the right partner, please. And I mean, I've said this even in the companies. Often in a financial institution, everybody spends time in evaluating who they lend to. Okay? Because saying that money has to come back. I'm saying you need to spend the same amount of time in deciding who you take money from. Okay? You take money from a bank or you take money from a money lender. In the bank, he will send you notices. The money lender will come and break your knees. Okay? So it's important who you take money from also. It's the same thing. It's important who you partner. So please understand that. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much, sir, for answering that question. Now, we spoke about when it comes to partnering with other organizations, but a lot of our state interventions, of course, they're done in partnership with state governments itself. And a principle that we keep in mind when we're starting working with these state governments is that we study the existing programs that are launched by the education departments, and then we create a proposal around it, keeping in mind the priorities of the state governments as well. But what I think the audience here would like to know a little more is what can these proposals also include to make it stand out more, apart from us capturing the priorities of the state government itself?
Okay. Often you'll see the priorities because, I mean, the education secretary at best is there for 3 years. Okay? And most people, there are very few exceptions I've seen who are passionate about education and who want to make it. Like, I mean, in Maharashtra, we had one person called Nand Kumar who spent 23 years of his IAS career in education by choice. And 3 years he didn't do it in Maharashtra, but he did it in some other state. So that was by choice. That is the exception. Most of them look at education as a punishment posting, saying that I've been sent there, okay, I have to find something to do for 3 years, and then I'll get on to a better posting, which is commerce or real estate or finance or something like that. That's everybody. So if you go to him and tell him that, if you give us the contract, we will develop a program which in the long term will give you excellent children. I mean, it cannot excite him. He said, long term, I won't be here. So that secretary will get the benefit. What about me? So I think any proposal that you have would have to look at the short and the long term, and you will need to evaluate it. And I think there are lessons to be learned from people when they give money. And I think while generally donors are a little more indulgent, if they like you, they give you money. I think this new breed of people called the impact investors and others, they're a little tougher. They're no different from a private equity fund. Okay, they want returns, but they will also tell you what exactly they will do to evaluate what you're progressing on. I think to make your proposals different, I think what you should do is assume that suppose this was an impact investor. Okay, what would you give a proposal for? Because they want to know that end of the day, they need to see and measure the impact. So how will you show them? And you can't tell them because not all financiers are something saying that I'll give you money now and 3 years later, I will start questioning you. Till that time, you do what you want. I like you. I like what your concept was. So take the money. Very few people you'll find like that. So therefore, you will need to have markers along the way. So how do I evaluate what I have done? Am I progressing? If not for anyone else, it's for you. I mean, how do I know I'm not going up the wrong path? I need to be able to find course correction because the path that you people have chosen to go on, there are no markers on the road. There are no signboard. There are no directions saying turn left at the next crossing or turn right at the next. Nothing. You're going into unmarked territory. Okay? If that is so, then you need to be able to clearly mark out saying, in 6 months, in 3 months, this is what I want. In 6 months, this is what I want. In 12 months, this is what I want. In 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. Okay? You need to have it marked out. And I think while you may emphasize the shorter term part of it in your proposals to the government, I think giving them the longer term story is equally important. Because remember, you talked about learning. I think you also have a responsibility for teaching. So if there is some way in which you can get that officer excited as to what the long term thing is and how it can benefit, then I think your job is done. May not be her, because from here he can move on anywhere else. And who knows, at that point he could be of help to you. So he's got to understand, he's got to be convinced that you know what you're talking about, that you're not here just to get that contract. Getting a contract is one thing, but if you show that this sector means a lot to you, that the end beneficiary that we are talking about mean a lot to you, and therefore the passion has to come through enough for him to be able to feel it. And it has to come when you present it, it has to come when he reads it. And for that, also remember that his attention span is pretty short. Okay? So there must be enough for him to get tickled. And if he's interested, then he can go back and get the bigger data. But I think it's important because people forget that this sector is not something which will give you overnight results. And that's why I was extremely shocked when one of the other NGOs working with the Niti Aayog, they were told to report on a weekly basis what the child's learning was in that week. I said, you idiots, for 70 years, you've neglected this sector. You've done nothing about it. And now you want to monitor on a weekly basis. If you can tell me what you learned in the last 1 week, I will tell you what the child learned in the last 1 week. And I can assure you the child learned much more. But that's not how you measure it. You don't do a weekly assessment of the child. Okay, so but you must have markers which you can measure and see if the learning is happening or not. So I think the excitement that you people feel, or the excitement that I feel when I interact with youngsters like you, they must feel the same thing. They shouldn't feel that, oh God, here's one more contractor who's come to me looking for a contract. No, you're not a contractor. This is your life passion. And these are long-term benefits which can come. And I can give one example now, which is not directly related to your question, but when people don't understand the long-term benefits of a decision which gets taken. Today, when we are talking about COVID-19, what is the success model that everybody talks about? Kerala. Correct? Kerala's model, Kerala model. Kerala model started in the 1960s. In the 60s and 70s, the state government of Kerala spent 90% of the state budget on education. 90% of the state budget. Today, that thing has gone down to less than 5, I think. In other states, it never went up above 5. But that 90% spending, and it was spent on the girl child. In Kerala, it's understandable because it is a matriarchal society anyways. But that led to better infant mortality numbers. It led to better maternity care. It led to better setting up of... Because once a child was educated, once the mother was educated, the girl was educated, they asked for things. The primary healthcare centers came up. That's what has worked in Kerala. You can't start it today in Maharashtra and say, I want to adopt the Kerala model. Sure, it may not take you 60 years, but it will not take you 6 weeks to be able to achieve that. So it is important. And I'm saying that this just didn't happen. At that point in time, there must have been someone in the government who took the long view. And I'm sure it was not an easy path for him to fight. He fought it because he believed in it. And I think that's what you need to do. You can't afford to fight with the education secretary, but and you can't go and tell him, let me tell you what is important for you, because your meeting is over right there and then. He's going to throw you out. But I think in the proposal, somewhere it has to come through as to what the longer term impact of education is. And it's not that he will be able to read and write and do maths. there'll be significant benefits in the social environment and in the economic environment. And I think somewhere your proposals will have to touch on it. It can't be too much, but I think the benefits, there must be enough documented evidence and all, which you can cull together and be able to put it together. And someday, sometime when he's not getting sleep at night, you'll read it, no? And you might get educated at night. So, okay. So I think it's what you do is you tell them what will he benefit from in his short term. That this is what we can do. But this is the legacy that he can leave behind. Okay? Leave behind a legacy. And it doesn't matter whether Deepika told him this thing, or he can say, this is what I want to leave behind. That's fine. How does it matter? The children will benefit in that state. So do the short term, do the long term. Don't just say in the long term, because then it's like John Kane said, in the long term, we're all dead anyway. So why worry?
Thank you so much, sir. Very powerful closing to that question, especially. So there's a question we have from Shiksha Lokam, from the team at Shiksha Lokam. So the organization has expanded in more than 6 states over the last 1 year itself. And so that's an exponential growth for them as an organization. And they want to know what are certain risks that we should be mindful of while we are expanding so rapidly, especially through state level interventions.
The biggest risk to my mind is when you grow so rapidly is that you don't have the management bandwidth. Okay? And if you don't have management bandwidth, then the quality of your delivery will suffer. Or you will have to create and find ways of getting more than 24 hours in a day, which the last time I looked up all the records was not possible. Okay? You can't get more than that. So then, and you may get the whole team with you, but today, how many of you are? 10, 12 people over here just now? Okay. Now, if to go to, how many states? You're in 6 states now, right? You want to go to 12 states. And remember, the demand is not a problem. Okay? But if you deliver in 1 or 2 states, the others will come to you. And that's what I believe in. And this is the other thing which I told the other entity that I work with, Gyan Prakash Foundation, is they came into after we had done the initial work and everything, the Maharashtra government signed a contract and said, will you take on these 4 districts and do the educational thing out there? And I said, if I'm on your board, you're not doing 4 districts because you don't have people. You will take on 2. And let's work with another entity that we know and let them take on 2. And I said, yes, your growth will be a little slower, but it will be better. By the time the 2nd year and the 3rd year was happening, he got a call from 2 other districts, the education commissioner from there, saying, मैंने क्या पाप किया? आप यहाँ नहीं आते? So I said, is there anything better than someone asking you to come, rather than you going there and telling him, hey, you got a problem and I can come and fix it? They don't listen. But if he says, why can't you come? So I think growth is a good thing, but rampant growth at the risk of the organization, at the risk of the culture, at the risk of the value system, because when you grow too rapidly, then you just got to bring in people. And you may not have the time to screen them well. Then you're just bringing on bodies. You're not bringing in like-minded people. And there is always a big risk when you bring in people who are not like-minded. You guys are all service-oriented. You want to serve humanity. Some guys will come in because they just want a job. Okay? And that's not what this sector needs. So my suggestion, instead of going around looking for structures and processes, is see if you can get away by tempering the growth. The toughest thing to do sometimes is to say no. But I think the best thing to do sometimes is to say no, which you often do, right? I mean, you guys may not know it, but I mean, as a child, you wanted to put your finger on the hot fire or the hot vessel? And the mother said, no. She did it because her intentions were good. You didn't know any better. And I'm saying it's a crude example, but it's not different. It's not different. So don't get carried away by growth. Growth opportunities will come. The country has left so much undone work for the not-for-profit sector. So don't worry about it. Don't worry. You will have enough and more work to do. Okay? So at this point, I mean, I think, see, sometimes very early, if you start structuring and processing an organization, you will lose the energy of the people. So in the early stages, as long as you have people with a uniform mindset, I think it's fine. As long as you are interacting regularly and closely and you know what each one of you is doing, give a free hand. Because whether we like it or not, a structure does create a little bit of hardening of the arteries. Okay, the blood will flow a little slower. So it's important that you don't create a structure and reporting matrices and everything too early. Let people have a little freedom. And if they're learning, they will be able to do things on the field. Because I don't think any of you guys sitting over here know what the problems of the last mile are. Okay? You may know it through second hand and third hand, but you don't know the real life thing. What you hear is the interpretation of that person on the ground, what he thinks is the problem. That may not even be the problem. That he's looking at it from his lens and his knowledge so far. So he interprets that as a problem. It may not be a problem for all you know. And I think, therefore, it's important for people who go out in the field. And I think I've mentioned this to Santosh. Sometimes I worry about the growth rate that you guys are going at. One is the horizontal growth rate, the geographic growth rate. The other is the spread of things that you guys are doing. It worries me. I know it needs to be done, and it takes me a little time to accept it. For the first time, Santosh told me about they're now getting into, when the whole COVID and the lockdown started, they're getting into feeding of the children, they're doing this, doing that, and I'm saying it. But then when I thought about it, I said maybe that is important for the learning of the child. If they don't have the stomach full, they're not going to be learning. So I think it's important that you do these things, but let them be thought through. Sometimes I think, yeah, don't overthink, but that's my problem. Okay, I will think it to the end, but I'm fortunate that my wife will do things and then think. So I keep saying, I mean, I will do ready, aim, fire, and she will do ready, fire, aim. Okay, so I think as a balance, I think it's working out well. So you need to have people to balance out what you do. But don't over-structure, don't over-process it, and learn it. You can always correct it. So if you write your process, write it in pencil. You can erase it and change it. Because as a 10% team is one thing. As a 20% is different. 200 people, it's going to be very different. But don't hardcode it saying, no, but that's how we said we will do it. That's how you said 5 years ago. That's how you said it when the learning levels in this village were this here. Today they've changed. The requirement has changed. So I think that question right at the beginning about how do you create a learning organization, I don't think you can create a learning organization. God has created people who are, until you tell them, they will learn. It's only, I think, at least in our times it used to be when the teachers told you not to learn. They said, stupid, don't ask that question. And it's happening even today. It's happening even today, where because the teacher doesn't have an answer, she says, no, not now, we'll do it later. Just, I think, let's not stymie the learning. Learning, I think that question was, whoever asked it, the brilliant question on the spot, how do you create a learning organization? I think people will make it happen. The leader will display that he is learning, she is learning. And so don't get upset when I say he, because for me, he and she are interchangeable. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. And I think to your point about what we're doing and how we're doing it now and how we're looking at things now, I think now more than ever we're seeing this overlap of livelihoods and education,
Sure,
coming together.
sure.
And there's a related question over here, which is more rooted to the current situation itself. That in the current situation, education might not be the priority of state governments, and as we all know, there will be a setback in learning outcomes among students by at least a few years because of the current situation. So, what more can we do to build a sense of urgency so that this crisis does not go, unnoticed by the governments itself?
I think solutions, the fact that you guys exist is because the government didn't do something. Okay? So a lot of times, and I've said this many times before, that we sit and criticize the government for not doing this, for not doing that. I said, just sit back 1 minute and look at what you said. If that government had done everything that they were supposed to do, you would be looking for another job because they would have solved the education problem. They would have solved the primary healthcare problem. What would you do then? So I think it's important not to just keep on criticizing the government, but I think looking at often why they do what they do and why they don't do what they don't do. And then looking at that they are not the only ones responsible for the education. And I think one of the most powerful things which I've heard about and seen it being operated on has been the SMCs, the school management committees. Okay? And I think this is the time when you can leverage those school management committees because there the real interested parties are involved. The parents are there, the village elders could be there, the teachers are there. So don't look for an institutional solution coming from the state level. Look at the ground root, at the ground level itself, whether you can find a solution. The big challenge is because I think the schools are not opening and you are not able to have teachers in there going and teaching and so on and so forth. Therefore, children are suffering. And I think a lot of talk has been going on about online learning and so on and so forth without realizing that I think many of these people won't have access to smartphones. And even if they had access, they won't have access to a proper bandwidth. Okay. So, I mean, having a 2G or BSNL is not going to help you download any lesson. And so I would suggest that you may not be able to help improve and push, but I think whatever you can work with the SMCs, and if there are ways in which you can leverage them to increase the learning at home, that should be because possibly many of these rural areas have not got affected, so they're not under the red zone. So they may still have possibilities of schools. Okay, if they are happening, then I think you need to continue with them. But those which are the urban and centered areas, they have a problem. But the urban centered areas, at least they don't have a connectivity issue. And you cannot find a solution like some of the other not-for-profits are doing, which is basically trying to see whether they can have shared devices. And shared in the sense that a child will have it for today and another will have it tomorrow, or I'll have it for 2 days, somebody else will have it for 2 days, and so on and so forth. Because that has been one of the solutions. In fact, frankly, I Teach for India, they're trying to do that, is to see whether they can make these available, but they're doing it initially, I think, in the 8th, 9th, and 10th standard, so that their graduation does not get affected. And then they will, as they get more funds and as they get more donors who are able to donate these. But remember, they are in the metro cities. Okay, Teach for India is in metro cities. Connectivity is not a problem, other than what anyone experiences. But where you are operating, connectivity could also be a problem. So there may be teaching material which will have to be handed out and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think at this stage, The other is really to be able to continue talking to the state government, because I think even the money has not been taken out of the education department and given somewhere else. That money has not gone. So there isn't a shortage of funding. The shortage is of attention. So maybe you won't get the chief minister's attention, but the education secretary's attention should continue to be there. So your efforts over there should not be diluted at all by what COVID is doing. That push should continue. That interaction should continue. Okay? I mean, there are no specific answers that can be given for any of these, because I guess you know the people there much better than I do. And what may excite the education secretary in Punjab may not excite the Tamil Nadu education secretary, because they march to different tunes, their priorities are different at different points. So I think the person on the ground is important. So let them decide that. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, sir.
Okay.
So I just wanted to quickly check with you if we could extend this conversation by about 15 minutes more.
15
If
minutes,
that's okay.
please.
11:15. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, sir. I would now like to, give an opportunity to my colleagues as well to interact with you a little bit. If any of you have a question for Deepak, sir, please unmute yourself, turn on your camera,
Only
introduce yourself.
easy questions.
Yeah.
Only
Yes.
easy questions. Okay?
Easy questions. Yes.
No tough questions. My days of answering questions is over. I didn't even realize what Santosh went and put out, saying, ask me anything. I mean, I almost felt like telling him, you can ask me anything, but I may not be able to answer anything. So,
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll
okay.
ask you easy questions. So, any easy questions for Deepak sir to answer right now?
See, there were no easy questions. They only had the tough ones. Huh? Thank God I specified.
All right. So,
Okay.
okay. Last 5 seconds for anyone to jump in, or I'll move on to the next question.
I can go, Deepika, if you
Sure,
if
Santosh. Please.
yeah. I generally
You
have I generally have meeting time with
difficult,
you every month.
difficult questions.
No. I would just quote what you told. So,
Ah,
sir, you told that doing something and getting it done. It was a very important thing for us also to understand. Uh, See, many of us over here, we have been we have or we have reached, or we are trying to reach a point where we are trying to get things done, but we always have that mindset to do the things on our own.
yeah.
How to change it, or how do we it's not easy, and it's not getting easier for us, because
See,
many of us are still on that move that अरे यार ये तो खुद ही से कर लेते हैं.
see,
How to change that?
the problem is you guys want to do things. I was born lazy. Okay. So, and my role model was Huckleberry Finn. Have you read that story, Huckleberry Finn? Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn was supposed to paint the fence. This is a story from the 1940s, 50s, whatever. And he had an apple. So he caught a friend of his and said, I will give you this apple if you paint the fence. Okay? The idea being that he didn't want to do anything, he just wanted to get it done. Huh? And I think that is important. But on a more serious note, I think if you become perfect at doing what you're doing, it didn't happen the first time you did it. It possibly didn't happen the second time you did it. It took you a little time to get to that level of perfection, whatever level of perfection it is. So it's rather unfair to expect someone who does it for the first time to reach your level of perfection. Just think of the time when you started, what did you do? And then let him. I mean, one of the things I've told my colleagues was, I don't have a problem with you making mistakes. Okay? I don't have a problem. But try and avoid making the same mistake twice. Make new mistakes. No problem. Because all it will mean is that you tried something else. And trying something else is fine. Don't make the same mistake twice. And I think it's important. I mean, you could be doing things because you are fanatical about perfection. Okay. I'm also a fanatic about perfection. Okay. I want it done perfectly. I mean, this is what my family and everybody keeps complaining about me. But I think my laziness is even more than that. My desire for perfection is ranked number 2. My laziness is number 1. And therefore, if I can find someone else to do it, I mean, I always joke with things. And so I would tell my people, I said, listen, I have no problems in doing what you're supposed to do. I will do it for you. But at the end of the month, half your salary must come to me. If you're okay on that, I will do it. Okay? Now that sort of brings it to the focus. And they say, no, you stay out of it, I will do it. Okay? So, so it's not easy. It's not easy, Santosh. But I don't think you have an option.
Yeah.
The only option you have is not to grow.
Yeah.
Don't grow, then you can do exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
You want to
Right.
grow, you can't do it all. You got to give it to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the question was more for my team members than me. I am good at delegating. Okay. Okay, Deepika, you can continue.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you, Deepak. So, any other questions from the teams here? Now is the time.
So I had a question.
Yeah.
So my name is Deepak. It was really nice hearing you for the past 1 hour. I think I learned a lot in this past 1 hour. This is a very probably a very operational related question, something that I've been facing for quite some time. So like you said, expectations, right? Like you gave an example of Niti Aayog. They're asking for data every 1 week. I think even we work with a lot of corporates as well. There are a lot of we work on a lot of CSR funding, and their expectations are also
Sure.
similar, like growth
Sure.
in 1 year. How much how much have the students learned in 1 year? How do we? I mean, from your experience, how do we like? I mean, lack of a better word, I want to say tackle. How do we convince our
Okay.
partners or funders with this?
I think it's education and also it's expectation setting. When you send the proposal in, I think if the proposal just says, please give me 1 crore, with that I will be able to educate X number of children in these classes. That's one way to do it. The other is to be even more specific, saying that when I say educate children, this is what I mean to do. And this is what I will do in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. And if you're since you're trying to do multi-year financing, then you give a proposal which will say up to 3 years, if I have assured funding, this is what I can do. And these are ways which are, without asking for money for 3 years, these are ways of giving a message to the donor also, saying that if it is a continuing program, then I think the journey for the child also can be continuing and it won't end at the end of the 1 year when that donor money runs out. So hinting at a 3-year funding is this one way to do it. But the other is when you spell these out, saying these are the markers we can look for. Now, they can debate and say, if you say that, fine, I can see 10% improvement in his ability. Today, he can only do addition, but in 3 months' time, I'll make sure he can do not just addition, but also multiplication. And in 6 months' time, I can make sure that he can do even divisions. And in a year's time, maybe he can do fractions or whatever. Or it won't be these number problems, but I can give him a written qualitative problem and he'll be able to, like, I mean, if you had 10 apples and your brother took away 6 apples, how many were you left with? Being able to translate that I think, if you spell out with examples of what markers are, then they can ask you those questions. So what you need to do is give leading questions. Don't make them think, because if they think, they'll come up with questions which you can't answer. So you got to help them to help you. Okay, so you frame the questions and say in your proposal itself that this is what we expect the child to have learned. They'll come back to you saying, you said this thing, did you do it? That's easy for you to answer because you said that if you didn't say that, they would come out with some question which from the corporate side would generally be stupid because they don't know what you're really dealing with. And a lot of people don't know. And I didn't know it until I got engaged in this end of the business. Okay. So I think it's unfair to expect them to ask you what you think is the right question. Please help them. You specify the metrics. And that's what you need to do always. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Revati. Okay, maybe one more question from the team.
Can I go? I just have a
Yes,
quick
Anjali.
question. So, sir, I'm Anjali and really enjoyed listening to you. I think I've laughed a lot today because of a lot of things that you said. Just a question because you've been working in the corporate sector for quite some time and now you've moved into this sector. Just wanting to understand, are there any practices that NGOs should learn from corporate sectors? And are there any practices that we should definitely not kind of imbibe? If you could just like throw some light on that. Because we've never been in that sector, so it's just something that I'm trying to like understand from.
And is it really important? Why would you want to learn something from the corporate sector? I'm just saying, the corporate sector can teach you many bad habits, okay? And I think you're happier without them. I've spent a long time there. Then it is really for the individual not to pick up those bad habits. One is they generally believe funding is that much easier in the corporate sector than it is in the not-for-profit. So building up overheads is easier. Building up layers is easier. And building up structures is easier. I don't think you need to get into that. That's why I think even in the last 1 hour, I've been emphasizing that I don't think structures are important. People are important. Processes, they're there only to be changed. Okay? And I'm not saying change them for the sake of changing them. But I think, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the corporate sector does everything wrong. There are many good things they do. But it's a question which is putting me in a spot because if I say they do nothing right, then I think 40 years of my life I wasted, right?
So is this anything we should be wary of so that like we don't, because I'm sure we're using a lot of structures and ways of working.
And therefore, is it important for you to brand it and say this is from the corporate sector or this is from? It's
Maybe
not important.
Sure.
Where you learn from, that's my thing. You can learn from anyone and everyone. There's so much I learn from you people, more than I ever can give back, more than I can ever give back. I learn. And does it mean that this stays only for my next not-for-profit discussion? Absolutely not. I take this back into the boardroom, the company boardrooms. And I'm saying if it can be done here without telling them that it can be done here, I'm saying, why can't we look at it this way? It's another way of. So I think it's being continuously learning. So the only role model I have is to be like a sponge, just absorbing. Anyone says anything, absorb. I don't care where it comes from, whether it's the corporate sector, not the corporate sector, whether it's an individual. There's so much to learn. So I think maybe I don't have an answer. That's why I'm going round and round and giving you this answer. But this is one of the things you learn from the corporate sector is when you don't know an answer, confused. Okay? That you don't pick up, please.
That is nice.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you for that question. Sir, I have one more question in terms of our last segment, which is on funding and fundraising. So there's just one question over there that I'd like to ask you. That is there a shift from traditional funding sources like grants and donations towards impact funding? And what are some of the checks an impact investor would look at before investing?
Okay. Is there a shift? There will be a gradual shift, but I doubt whether it will ever turn into an either or situation. It will never be a black and white. It will be shades of gray. Okay. No, no, not the book. This. Okay. And I think whatever impact investing means, and because I'm not too knowledgeable about it, I called up a friend of mine yesterday who's involved in this sector and understands this thing to understand what is impact investing. And he said the first thing the impact investor will look at, there are two words, right? Impact and investor. And he said the investor will want his money back with some return, however low it may be, but some return. That is the investor. Get my capital back and a return. Then the impact. Because they might be slightly tougher than a donor who you could convince and say that, I'm going to do good for the community, I'm going to do this for the children. And some of them are soft and are trying to soothe their own conscience and say, okay, here's a check and you go and do something. Impact investors are not like that. They're hard businessmen. That's when I said that what you need is being able to spell out the markers of your journey. What will you be picking up? The ability to be able to say, this is the impact I will make or I expect to make in the 1 year, 3 years, 5-year period. And for them, you need to take longer term money because impact of the nature that they would be looking for cannot be had in a short period. So the impact has to be spelled out. And then the impact that will be felt over even a longer period will be the impact that can happen in the community. Now, therefore, impact investing is not suitable for all sectors. Well, I'm not quite sure that you would be able to return the capital or give any return in the activities that you do. But then there are certain activities which I think should be driven by investor capital and not by donations, because it also helps the individual to begin to realize that they have a responsibility of giving back what they got. So, because I strongly believe that while I have given money away, I generally don't feel happy about it until I say, you put something in it along with me. You must have a contribution, you must have a skin in the game. So if it goes down, you also lose something along with me. Not because I want you to lose something, but because I know that you don't want to lose it, and therefore you will make every effort to make sure it doesn't go down. So having skin in the game is important. So for example, if you're supporting the development of handicrafts or whatever, they will be selling it end of the day. How can you help them to leverage it? Because your responsibility, the long-term impact you want to make is make them ready to be able to borrow from the formal financial sector. So if they build up a credibility of paying back loans, they will be able to establish their credibility to a bank, maybe a cooperative bank to begin with, an urban cooperative, whatever. But they will, and you will make them independent. That's the impact you want to make. So it is important to be able to spell it out, but I don't think every sector is right for this. The other example we had was this Rural Shores. It's an entity which sets up BPOs in rural areas. Okay, and they do it on a commercial basis. But if you have to get commercial rate loans, it would be tougher. So they got impact funding, and they've been able to service those loans also. They've been able to service the equity also. Okay, but that is because there is a revenue model that they have. It's just that the commercial terms may not be sustainable, and therefore impact investing comes in and works for them there. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Okay.
taking that question as well.
Deepika, I have one thing which I wanted to mention, which I think I missed out earlier when we talked about
Sure.
culture and values and all, and I talked about the leader setting examples. Okay. One of the toughest things that a leader has to do is take tough decisions. But when the person is taking tough decisions, if he is seen to be fair, he can take as tough a decision as anything and be accepted for it. But if he's not seen to be fair, saying that I'll be tough with Deepika, but I will be easy with Santosh, then they've lost the respect and they will not accept these decisions. So being fair, you can give tough decisions. When I talked about setting examples, let me give you a life case. This was our third year of operation of the life insurance company. There were many others which had started off and everybody was racing to try and get the business. And we had agents. And the law very clearly says that an agent cannot rebate, meaning he cannot share the commission that he earns with his client, not to give it back as a kickback. Okay? But it's been a rampant practice ever since LIC came on the scene. Giving back these things has not been a problem for them. They've been able to do it. We said our value systems will not accept this. Okay? You will not rebate. And if you rebate, you're out. So the third topmost selling agent we had in the country was in Chandigarh. And he was number 3 and the number 4, 5, 5 were way below. And an individual complained to me saying that, sir, he promised to give me part of the commission and he's not giving it. So we got that established, that he's not giving it. I said, fair enough. That's a problem. You can't get it for these reasons. But as far as the agent is concerned, he's got to go. We have to sack him. So everybody says, so how can you sack him? He's the third most productive agent. Our sales will suffer. This will happen. I said, either you tell me that we are willing to sacrifice our values, or you tell me we're willing to sacrifice sales. You can't get both. And I said, if you ask me, it's going to be the values which will stay. Sales go, the next guy will come and step in and do something. But he will not stay in this company. And then I made sure that that example was talked about everywhere, not by name. No names were given. And I'm not giving you a name even now. But saying that you do this, this is what the outcome will be. So it's not only positive stroking, but you've got to be able to take the decision which will say, I truly believe in upholding the values of this company. If it means my performance as the CEO will suffer, so be it. I'll have to find other ways to grow, but this will not be allowed. So I think these are things. I mean, writing out what your culture and what your value is not going to work. This gave a strong message, very strong message to everyone. Okay, I'm done. I've run out of anything more to say. Huh?
What a wonderful lesson to share towards the end of our conversation also, sir. And I think this is something that will definitely stay with us also for a really long time. We're going to try and imbibe it. And it's really disappointing that our time is up. Because I think we really want to keep listening to you, and I only wish that we had more time. But nevertheless, thank you so much, sir, for meeting with the teams of Shiksha Lokam and Mantra.
Thank you.
I think
very
you
much.
give us you gave us some very important insights on people, passion, partnerships, growth, ego, ambition, everything. And I think we had such a well-rounded conversation here with you today, and we're just looking forward to our next interaction with you also, which I hope is going to happen really, really soon. And we have so much to learn, sir, and so much to imbibe from your experience and your insights. And I'm sure that the teams here also resonate with it.
You know, as I say, I keep learning. And what I've learned from Santosh is after every conversation that we have, Santosh will prepare the minutes of the meeting, what all was talked about, and then he will write out what his learnings were. And I think when I read that, I say, God, did I say that? That's really nice, very intelligent. Okay. I don't remember saying that, but I think that's the learning he picks up from all this garbage of words that I put out. You know, I'll speak for 15 minutes and one sentence he will pick up. like just now, when the question that he asked about doing it and getting it done, I think it's extremely important for a leader. But he picked that up, and I think that's this tremendous skill that he has. So if at all I have to leave a thought with you is, whoever has been saying, sir, great things you said, great thing, very much, very much. After half an hour, okay, which is enough time for you to forget everything I've said, write down what you think you learned. If there is something you are able to write down in half an hour, then it's a possibility that you really heard me and you learned something. If at the end of half an hour you scratch your head and say, what the hell did that guy say? I mean, it sounded nice at that time. He was very funny, but I don't remember a thing of what he said. Okay.
Yes, we're going to do that for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Deepika. Thanks for the
Yes.
opportunity. Thanks,
Thank
Santosh.
you.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Deepika, can
you.
you take a
Thank
group
you so
photo before release?
Okay, I'm actually on my phone, so if anyone on the laptop can do this.
Do what?
Yeah, Anjali. Anjali is taking us just
Requesting
a
everybody
group
to
photo
share the
of
video.
all of us.
Oh, okay. How do you get a group photo? Do you have a thing for gallery view also?
I do.
On Google Meets?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Yes,
God.
yes.
Someday I'll have to ask my grandson
We'll send you the picture.
to train me on this part too.
Okay. So smile, everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Great,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.
You've started our day on a very enriching note. Thank you
Thank
so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.